Welcome to Celtics Rundown, and we are joined by good friends of the program, the first duo to be recurring guests on this live stream. We have Jack Simone, the maestro over at Hardwood, Houdini. We have Sam LaFrance from Celtics Blog. Together, they make How About Them Celtics. Guys, thanks for joining me once again.
Yes, sir. Never been called a maestro before. I like that.
One
That's
of our
fun.
besties.
You know, I'm a big fan of alliteration. I didn't have something off top to just kind of put another M next to maestro, but it still had to be out there, and it's well-deserved, Jack.
Thank you.
So we kick it off, Sam. I'll throw it over to you. We don't have to dwell too much on last night's rather ugly loss to a shorthanded Mavericks team that didn't have, most notably, Anthony Davis. I mean, what the hell happened in your estimation?
Yeah, they didn't have Luka either. Can't believe it. Seriously, they hate playing at home. They actually don't like when people pay good money to see them try and win basketball games. This is now actually it's beyond the three that have happened recently where they've come back from good road trips where they've just kicked the insides out of teams. Don't know what we're allowed to say on this program. And they come home and they just fall flat. It's been like an all-season thing. I saw Greeny put something out this morning about it, and it was a really good catch by him. They've been just their first loss of the season was after a nice road trip. They do not play well at home for whatever reason it is in these sort of spots. And yesterday was just another example of it. Jack and I talked plenty about it on the show last night. It was a comedy of errors. They couldn't get out of their own way. I think it was 8 of 18 was the number we were all throwing around after the game on layups.
In the first half.
Just in the first half. That's even worse. Missoula kind of pointed to it as being just as bad as a turnover, which is very true because whoever shot the layup is out of the play and the other team is playing 5-on-4 on a break. That can't happen. These are kind of unforced errors. Some of them were really bad misses, like the one that Tatum missed in transition was a tough one. Anytime they built any momentum or had any chance to swing the way the game was going, they did something stupid. The example I gave to Jack yesterday was Peyton Pritchard blocks Kyrie late in the third quarter on a three, gets the rebound, starts running in transition, immediately has the ball stolen from him. Like that could have been a point where the Celtics were like, oh, we might have this. Like maybe the crowd gets back into it a little bit, but they just couldn't do anything to swing the game. And it feels like they do this a lot when they come home from these road trips. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it just felt like everything was going wrong for them at times last night. Like, I don't think this was a game where they let Klay Thompson shoot a bunch of threes, a la Dylan Brooks or some other guys that they've given some space to. I just think he got hot. I don't think they pressured him well enough. I don't think Sam Hauser stuck with him well enough, and that led to him just being on fire for most of the first half. And then I thought they didn't do a good job defending in transition. It's going to be harder to defend in transition when you miss your layups, like Sam just mentioned. So it just felt like a night where every small thing that could have gone wrong did go wrong for the Celtics, and that just steamrolled and avalanched into a loss. And it wasn't pretty. It was pretty ugly, if anything else. But the way I phrased it when we recap the game is this is a game that I wouldn't be worried about if it was last year and it was one in a bunch, because I don't think this was they were absolutely horrendous on both ends. I thought they just made some silly errors, but considering that they've made these silly errors a lot this year, then it's kind of like, okay, what are we doing?
Well, so that's my thing. And Brad Stevens even talked about, and we'll get more in depth on his presser later, but he talked about the need to build winning habits to peak at the right time. And so I'm very curious to see how this team looks coming out of the All-Star break when they get a chance to recharge. And then it really is the time to build and develop those habits, because if the reality is that this team is just waiting to flip the switch in the postseason, maybe it works, but typically for teams, it doesn't. And at a minimum, it's how you make yourself most vulnerable, Sam.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like they did a lot of great things last year where the mentality that they would carry from game to game was, doesn't matter what happened last game. We're here today. We have to win we have to win the day. It doesn't feel I don't know if we've heard them talk about winning the day at all. All we hear about is process, which might be the same thing. But you don't really see that anymore. There are games where you clearly can tell that they're just not as engaged. And whether you want to attribute that to just boredom, like they're like, we won the championship already, bring us to the playoffs, then we'll start playing hard again and really lock in. Sure. But in the time being, it's really a tough watch. Like I saw somebody Celtics Blog comment this today because I about the letdowns after these road trips, and they're like, "Why would I want to spend my like hard-earned money to go see a home game where I'm not confident all that they're going to win?" And Jack and I talk about the home away thing, and Jack doesn't really put a lot of weight into it, and that's fine. Like they have to play 94 feet regardless of where they're at. Like the court is the same; it doesn't make that much of a difference. But what teams are playing for when they're trying to get the top seed in the playoffs is that home court advantage. You would like to feel confident in them being able to take advantage of that if they earn that privilege. And right now, I don't think you can.
Yeah, I put more stock. Sorry to jump in front of you, Jack. I put more stock in the fact that coming off of road trips, even if it's just 3 games, that tends to be the one where I would tell fans there's a pattern here this season where maybe that's not the time to spend your money. You can't guarantee they're going to win the game you go to, but you do want to see them be competitive. You want to get your money's worth. And so it just, it goes to show that these times where they've been away from home for a little bit, that first game back typically has been an ugly product.
Get your money's worth on the opposing money line.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been as good at home last year. I think there's a big part of it that we just got spoiled last year because they were like historically good at home last year, which was always going to be almost impossible to replicate. Like they were insane at home last year. What were they? They were 37-4. That doesn't happen. Like the only team that could still reach that mark is the Thunder, and they're already 22-3. Like that's an extremely high bar that is almost impossible to replicate. That said, like they're 16-10 at home right now. The Knicks are 18-9. The Pacers are 14-7. The Bucks are 16-8. They're pretty average at home for a good basketball team, which is not where you want to be because you want them to be really, really good at home. But I think part of it is like what you said, Bobby. Like they come home from these road trips and they're really good on the road. They're like the best road team in the NBA by a lot. And they're either tired or they're playing a team that maybe they don't care about playing enough, which is a problem in and of itself. And that leads to some of these home losses. And what Sam said, I get that the crowd gives an extra boost, but I don't think home and away should dictate, oh, you can play good here and you're allowed to play bad there. I think it's a basketball with the same basketball, the same court, the same nets, the same players. Just play the game.
Yeah, I overall lean more towards that side of the argument. I will say that being able to sleep in your own bed and you're a little more familiar with, especially in the case of the parquet, which is kind of a unique court, you're more familiar with the setup there and the rim. So there can be small advantages that help you. It's not some massive one, although the crowd at TD Garden can make a game in February feel like it's a playoff atmosphere. So there are advantages there for sure. But overall, like Jack said, you got to play the game. You're going up against NBA competition and the dimensions are the same. It's not like baseball where, one stadium can look dramatically different than the next. As far as what the Celtics did at the trade deadline, they moved Jaden Springer plus a pair of second-round picks that are protected. They get one back that's heavily protected from the Houston Rockets. We'll get to Jaden Springer in a second, excuse me. But first, just are you, it's hard to say you're surprised by a move where the Celtics trim about $15 million in tax payments. So if you were, leading into the deadline, is this what you consider, Jack, the most likely scenario for Boston?
I think so. Like, I think trimming. I was surprised they signed Torrey Craig. Like, I was surprised they did anything. I thought they would just elevate guys. And I think this is kind of just where we're at. I think, unfortunately, to not, spare the feelings of my co-host here, like it was kind of inevitable they were going to trade Jaden Springer and just roll with the roster. Like it just felt like what they were going to do. So I think we are living in the world that was the most likely scenario. And I think that's kind of where they're at. And I still think they'll be fine. Like, I don't think they needed to do anything to be a good team, but I think what we saw was what was always going to happen, if that makes sense, even though that's kind of a backwards way of phrasing it.
I felt the same way until like 3 weeks ago. Then I was like, maybe they found something. Maybe they're going to convince themselves to keep him. I do still feel like there are times that they may miss him, as silly as it may sound. Like, they might have missed him last night on a night where Drew didn't play. They could have used that extra guard off the bench to be a defensive menace to come in the game, maybe give them a little bit of energy at times when they didn't really have it. It's not going to make or break you in a playoff run. Probably not. but it is a type of player that is valuable to have, in my opinion. And I don't like this just salary dump. It's not my money. I can't really like get behind it. I understand it, especially if like I heard Greeny say this last night on late night first floor shout out. If it's going to help you down the line be more comfortable with keeping the core together, sure. If that's money that you're going to keep in your back pocket and be like, okay, like we had a break here, let's regroup, keep everyone together, or, make whatever smart team first move there is rather than being cheap about it, that's fine. Ultimately,
I
it
mean,
sucks for Springer. I pump faked Bobby bad.
I got
Good
him.
for
That's a
him.
foul on me.
And,
Hand up.
0-1 since the trade.
0-1 since the trade. We'll keep an eye on that. And I mean, look, could Springer have had a playoff moment for the Celtics? Absolutely. But at the same time, this is a title team returning over 97% of their playoff minutes. And when you look at, again, they shaved over $15 million in tax payments while there's an impending ownership sale and part one soon to happen. I mean, it's just hard to justify keeping, even as a restricted free agent, he probably wasn't going to be brought back. So we'll have to see what happens with Springer, who the Rockets bought out, and obviously hope that he latches on with the team and showcases what he can do. I suppose you can't rule out a world where the Celtics sign him over the summer. But again, when you're looking at the money saved for a player who was a part of your extended rotation, it's just hard to justify holding on to him through the deadline.
Yeah, I get the thought process of wanting a guy like Springer to come in and play defense, but he wasn't playing. Like, I get that he could have and he had shown flashes, but he just wasn't a regular part of the rotation. And so if you can sell that off and save the money and maybe use that money to feel more comfortable down the line. And I know it's not our money, but it's somebody's money. And clearly the Celtics, they weren't profitable last year. So somebody cares about the money because it's not working. Like, people need to have the context of this is literally a historically expensive roster. Like, teams don't pay for rosters that are $200 million less than this roster. And so if you can save a little money there, and for a guy who's not going to play night to night, and the guy that, as Brad Stevens said at his press conference last night, they brought in when they were injured and when they weren't sure about their guard rotation, and now they are, like, unfortunately, it just makes sense to make that move and save the money.
Were they injured last year? With the guards?
No. Sorry, let me rephrase. Brad said they brought in Jaden Springer when they didn't have Drew Holiday and Peyton Pritchard and Derek White under long-term contract extension, so they weren't sure if they were going to have them long-term. And now that they do, they don't need it. I misspoke.
I see. I suppose that makes a little bit more sense because one of the big reasons I wanted to see him stick around was like, I was like if you want to cheap out on some of the bigger money guys, like it's a cheap alternative. But if your plan is to stick with everyone, great.
2 fouls on me. And I could have seen a world where they trade Springer for a player to bring back. But again, when you look at the money saved and where he was in the team's hierarchy, the more logical thing was this was the direction they were going in. Ultimately, they did. But Sam, Jack brought it up earlier. They signed Torrey Craig. What are the Celtics getting in him?
Well, they get somebody to, I don't want to say push Sam Hauser, but to at least be there if he's hurt. Because he has been on and off hurt this season. It's extra wing body for them to throw in the rotation. It's a question of whether or not, Joe will actually play him. That's a very tall feat for anybody coming into the team. Joe's trust is not easy to earn. But I think it is good to have the extra wing. Jack and I discussed what we thought the team should do before the deadline. I thought one of the bigger targets should be getting an extra wing in case of injury or in case of like maybe you just don't like what Sam gave you that night. Yesterday, he was, I think, scored on 8 out of 11 times, or that was the field goal shots to attempts to makes or whatever it was. He wasn't great defensively. If you want a different look, you have it now. And that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I don't know how much Craig is going to give you like a night-to-night basis, but he is good enough to play in spots where you maybe just want a different look, like Sam said. I don't think he'll play in the playoffs. I think he could like be break glass in case of emergency, but I think it's more of this guy can play. He can defend a little. He can shoot a little. He can soak up some regular season minutes, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I considered big wing the primary position of need for the Celtics if they were, to add something. And Brad Stevens, he outlined it that this is a player who, and this was obviously before the move came to light, but as far as what they were looking for, and they might have already had agreed to something with Torrey Craig at the time of his press conference, but he said that this is someone who, when we look to add, it's going to be a wing. It's not going to be someone who plays every night, but it is going to be someone that we have confidence in, and that if their name gets called in the playoffs, we believe can make a big shot for us. And that was the case with Xavier Tillman Sr., Jack's guy a year ago, game 3 in the finals, stepped up. And so Torrey Craig, like Sam said, is Sam Hauser insurance, because that lower back pain that he deals with on and off now, it really can change the equation for the Celtics and what they're getting from the second unit. He's been shooting better for an increasingly long stretch now, but he's not the same defender he was a year ago because of this injury. And on nights where he's not giving you that same firepower off the bench, they feel that difference and the impact of it. So to have Torrey Craig on a night where, if they can tell Sam doesn't have it, let's see what we have in Craig here, who's a big, physical, versatile defender. He'll contribute on the glass, and at a low volume has turned himself into a pretty good three-point shooter over the course of his career. That's a valuable luxury to have from your stay ready group, which they just strengthened with this move. Way more of a two-way player than Jaden Springer, fills a bigger need than Springer had. And the other part of the equation is that when it comes to health, Craig has had trouble staying on the floor the last 2 years. He hasn't played since December, and he's only been in 9 games this season. But at the same time, as I've been trying to caution people, because this was my top target for the Celtics on the buyout market, is that they're not really leaning on him all too much. Like Jack said, you can't even guarantee the playoffs might go a certain way where he's just sitting on the bench, enjoying every game as a fan with a great seat. So the lack of dependence on Torrey Craig is why the Celtics can gamble on him.
Yep. Great point. It's just less workload on him. Hopefully you can give them good energy in spots. Like maybe he does a little of what we saw from O'Shea last year. That was one of my favorite things about him. He could come in a game, give you a little energy boost off the bench. He would hit the glass hard, get some offensive rebounds. I don't think Craig's going to be the exact same sort of player. But like you mentioned, Xavier Tillman Sr., maybe he's similar to that, where he is the different look guy for the wings rather than the bigs.
Yeah, I like Craig. Like I said, 34, I think he is. Don't know how much he'll actually play, but having another guy down there, because realistically, before this trade, the backup wing forward rotation behind the Jays and Sam Hauser was Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman, Drew Peterson. You don't really know if you trust those guys. Who knows if Joe will actually trust Craig enough to play him, but at the very least, you have like years of experience that you can back up to.
Yeah, it's about options. Last year, if the Celtics didn't do anything at the deadline, we would have said this team is an absolute wagon. They have every right to stand pat, and they should be just fine. But you get Xavier Tillman, and like we said, he makes a big play for you in the playoffs to help win Game 3 against Dallas, take a commanding 3-0 lead. So it's just about having more options, because really in the NBA, as we've seen, you can never have too many. So it's a nice pickup for the Celtics. They strengthen the stay ready group. And then I asked Brad Stevens yesterday, as we can get into his presser, and you guys even unprompted can bring up some of the things that he said that got your antennas up. But we start with the prospect of converting one of the two-way guys. I asked Brad Stevens about that, and he gave a long answer, so I'll just give part of it. But, quote, we have 13 guys right now. Now it's obviously 14 with Craig's addition. We'll probably do something with the 14th relatively soon, no lies told. And then we'll take our time with the 15th and really assess our health and needs and those type of things as we go on. So, Jack, when you hear those comments and you look at the addition of Craig, buy or sell that the Celtics convert more likely Drew Peterson, but one of their two-way guys to a standard deal?
I buy. I think it's what they did last year. I think they were in a more unique spot this year where they had 13, so they had to bring in somebody else, and they were like, okay, let's bring it back. Okay, I'll bring in a new face. But with the 15th roster spot, I don't think they'll want to go into the playoffs with only 14 guys, because you might as well just have 15 just in case. I think they'll wait till the last possible second to save as much money as they can, because when you have a roster like this, that's kind of just how you do it. And then in the end, I don't know who it'll be. I don't know if it'll be JD or Drew Peterson. I'd probably lean Drew Peterson, but I think it could make more sense to bring in JD because he just did sign a wing in Torrey Craig. And I've said this a bunch of times since the Springer trade. Like, he's been in the organization for 3 years. He's been one of the best G League players the last 2 years. You can still play him in the G League once he does sign a standard contract. Reward him for the efforts. Even if you're not going to bring him back here just give him. I would just reward him for his efforts with the standard deal because him and Drew Peterson are probably not going to play in the playoffs anyways.
Yeah, definitely not going to play. I like Peterson. I think you can even justify him being a guard if you would like. He can be like a 2 guard just because he's not very bulky. He does more guard things than like everybody thinks that he does. We saw him at Summer League bringing the ball up, passing, great vision. He can create a little bit off the dribble. I'm a big fan of his. I think he needs to put on some muscle, but I think if you want like a more unique guard, like he can give you a little bit more size there in terms of height. JD's fine. Like Jack said, neither of these guys are going to play if they get converted. Both of them have this same thing where it feels like they need to develop a lot more because their games are more widespread rather than being very focused in one area. Like both of them do a lot of things. JD is a great scorer and main. It's one of the reasons why he is one of the better G League players. It's because he is so widespread in his skill set. But to fit in as a role player on the Celtics, you actually just need to be elite at probably 2 things, defense and then one offensive thing.
Yeah, this is a team that wants two-way players. It's another reason that Craig made more sense than some of the potential buyout options for the Celtics, and their choices were limited to begin with as a second apron team. But when it comes to, look, if the decision is we're going to reward JD Davison and he's going to be a part of this playoff run on a standard deal, I'm all for that. Who wouldn't love to see it? He's rewritten the record books in Maine and really made significant progress from when he came into the organization at 19 till now. At the same time, if they convert one of them, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Drew Peterson with an eye toward let's just get a deal done now that allows him to be under contract beyond this season, and we don't have to address that over the summer. So that's something I could see. I have some stuff in mind, but first I'm more interested in getting both of your opinions and takeaways from Brad's presser. So Jack, we start with you. Is there anything beyond the prospect of converting a two-way player or, okay, we're primarily looking to add a wing, which they did right away. Is there anything beyond those 2 things that we just covered that stood out to you from Brad's press conference?
Nothing that was too crazy. I wasn't actually at the press conference because I didn't know what was happening. So I saw it, ended up on Twitter. Like we didn't know that there was a press conference. I think it was pretty standard, Brad. I mean, you talked for a while and it was a lot of we're gonna do this. I was kind of surprised that he said we're going to target a wing. In hindsight, probably just because they already knew that they had Craig lined up. But it was pretty like, yeah, we didn't do anything. We didn't really feel like we needed to do anything. We knew we weren't going to do anything. This team's fine. Like we know this team's fine. We've been struggling a little, but we were confident in this team being good. Like I liked him saying, about the championship window, like we can't miss this moment. I saw you tweet that out. Like we're good, we're ready. We'd like to do that. It was interesting to hear how they handled the Jaden Springer trade in terms of talking to him about it, letting him know that it was a possibility, stuff like that. But by and large, I think it was just a pretty standard Brad. We did what we did. It wasn't much. We're still confident in this team moving forward.
Yep. Same for me. It was, I mean, the big story was what we talked about was he was like, we have an idea. We're going to get a wing, which was, like Jack said, weird at the time. Hindsight makes it not weird because they probably already knew what was happening. I was a little surprised to hear about the 15th roster spot too. I guess it does make sense to go in with a full team, but just with them cutting costs and everything, I was surprised that they actually wanted to put another body on the team because they've had that spot open all year. It's not like they haven't been able to think about doing that so far.
Yeah, and then the other question that I asked him about was you save $15 million in tax payments. There's also an impending sale of the franchise. Was how influential was ownership in this decision to trade Springer, or was it just an opportunity where everyone looked at it and said, it's not rocket science here. This is clearly a move that we should make. It's the practical thing to do. And I take Brad's an excellent poker player. There are times where you walk away taking him at face value and then something else happens. But I do, again, take him at face value here when he talks about, we weighed the opportunities here and how much is someone actually playing and how much of an opportunity are they going to have moving forward once we get into the playoffs. And so when you have a chance to save $15 million under that scope, it makes sense to take it. And so I don't think that ownership told Brad anything. And at the same time, it's no secret that they gave serious consideration to trading Springer before the season started. And then probably considering that Houston waived him so quickly, I think this was initiated by the Celtics, but that doesn't mean that ownership said anything. I think that anyone can look at the situation and what they just saved and ultimately come to the conclusion, this is a move we should be actively looking to make, Jack.
Yeah, I think it was just a money move, unfortunately, for Jaden Springer, who had been playing pretty well. I think it was just something that was inevitable, that it was going to happen all year. And like, as annoying and as maybe rude or whatever to whoever it is to say, like, Jaden Springer's not worth $15 million. Like if you really want to put it in that lens, he's not a $15 million player. Unfortunately, he's probably like barely hanging on as a league minimum player at the moment. And he's good. And I do think a team should take a chance on him for that price. But like, clearly no one was willing to at the deadline. No one was willing to give up a second. No one was willing to pay him. The Rockets weren't even willing to keep him on the roster for a second. Like, it's just unfortunately where he's at. And if you're the Celtics and you do have a roster where you're about to have 5 players making roughly $30+ million, paying 15 million or whatever million plus taxes, making it 15 million for a guy who's not going to step on the court, and you have no indication will ever step on the court in the future because you're confident in your guard core, it just doesn't make sense financially at the end of the day, unfortunately, like I said, for Springer, who again had been playing well, but it's just the reality of the situation.
There's also still a draft
get
to find
correct.
like guys to come in and fill that like future guard project hopeful, whatever you want to call them. And I think that is the best takeaway from this, is they just didn't feel like he was the guy. There will be somebody else. It'll be fun. We can all root for him, probably watch him play in Maine. But right now they don't have him.
So for those keeping track at home, that's now 3 fouls on me against Sam, who's going to get me out of this live stream in a couple more. Nick Yak, I see you in the comments. Not exactly a revelatory comment that if a team has injuries to some of their best players, they become more vulnerable in the playoffs. So yes, of course. Same goes for the Knicks, by the way, as you saw last year against the Pacers. Jack, we wrap up with this, whether it's Luka, whether it's De'Aaron Fox, or something that happened yesterday. What was a move from the trade deadline that not necessarily stands out, but just kind of like gets you where you find yourself most invested in like thinking about that move? Maybe it got the biggest reaction from you.
Yeah. Luka to Lakers was the obvious one. I'm not going to go there because, I mean, when everyone collectively thinks a trade is fake for the first,
including
like, 20
NBA
minutes,
executives thinking Sean's got hacked,
then I think that's a pretty clear-cut winner. But I'll steer away from that. I'll go to Kyle Kuzma being a Milwaukee Buck because I think that's really interesting. And I think a lot of people are down on the trade. I actually kind of like it for Milwaukee by and large. Middleton is still the more efficient player right now. You can still hope that he can turn it up in the playoffs. But if they're truly not confident in his ability to play 30 minutes a night or play real minutes anymore, then you kind of have to move on to somebody else. And I don't think Kuzma's this like all world going to come in and change the face of the organization, but I do think he'll be a bit more efficient next to good spacing. I think he'll be a bit better next to 2 better players. I think he'll be better as the third option. And I do, and you get younger, you get like 4 years younger with Kyle Kuzma. So I like that. And I like it for the Wizards because they got AJ Johnson in a first or a swap or whatever. So I'm a bit higher in the deal, I think, than most. And I think it'll be interesting to see what Kuzma looks like, a longer defender, you know, just give you a different look than Middleton will at this point in his career. So I'm intrigued. Still don't think the Bucks are like a legitimate threat to get out of the East, but they have Giannis, and now they've got guys who can play. So maybe you give them more of a chance. But I that was the one I was looked at, was like, oh, what are we doing here? This is fun.
I mean, that's a good one. Obviously, like Luka shocked all of us. The Marcus trade yesterday is kind of interesting because Memphis, who is trying to compete, said, you know what, actually, just please, like, we'll give you draft picks. We don't want them anymore. It's not even like they got anything that's like, oh, this will help us. Like, this will give us a different look. Like, they got like Johnny Davis back. It's not like they didn't really get, yeah, sure, money. And the CBA, as Nick Yak said, like, has people in shambles.
They got to pay
trade
Aldama.
deadline, I mean, literally, the whole trade deadline is like the CBA playing puppet master. They got all these teams just tangled up, nervous, afraid of all the punishments, all that stuff. They give Marcus to the Wizards, And they also give draft capital, and then they gave up draft capital to get him from the Celtics. Like, the Celtics got Kristaps and a first-round pick for Marcus, who was effectively a salary dump at this year's deadline. I love Marcus. He's one of my favorite players ever. I'd love to see him come back someday. I'm also happy he's a Wizard. A lot of people were upset. They were like, damn, like, I'm really upset that he's on the Wizards. I don't have to root against him. What do I care if the Wizards win games? Now I can be like, what if the Wizards are a fun team? They won't be. They won't win games. But happy he's not a Laker, happy he's not a Buck, happy he didn't end up in Philly. I couldn't believe that the overwhelming reaction was like, did he get done dirty? Yes. Like, bad team, don't want to be on that team, wasting away on that team. Yes. Happy I don't have to hate him. So happy.
It's on brand that Sam rooting for Marcus only extends so far, that he'd rather see him on the Wizards playing for nothing at this stage of his career than go to a playoff team that he doesn't root for and enjoy watching, that he actively roots against.
Well, when the report came out at the beginning of the season that the Knicks wanted him, that was like a punch to the stomach. Yeah. What do I want to see? Nobody wants to see that. That should be banned. They should ban that. Now he has a great opportunity to go to Washington, be a great mentor for some of the young guys they have there. Everybody wins.
Both Memphis trades, quite frankly, again, it's on such a smaller scale. It's not in the same stratosphere as the Luka trade, but it's that same takeaway of, what am I missing here? Because if the motivation was it makes it easier to extend Jaren Jackson Jr. in the summer, why did they have to trade Marcus now when you are trying to make a playoff run here? And on top of it, they chose not to get a deal done with Jake LaRavia, a good player, and then had to attach a first-round pick to him. So it's a good pickup by Sacramento, as their front office is getting lambasted for how they've maneuvered. So to me, Memphis took a playoff team, made them worse, cost themselves some future assets, and all of this could have been handled at a later date.
I think Memphis's goal was probably, we want to give Santi Aldama a contract. Like we want to be able to pay him and extend him, and maybe they want to do that now, a la like the Drew extension that happened before the playoffs, so he's not thinking about it during the playoffs. So I don't know if that's allowed to get done or when it could get done. They also probably wanted to open up some minutes for Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams, who have been hurt all season. So when they come back, they'll probably want to play them. And the Jake LaRavia thing, I'm pretty sure they declined his fourth-year team option, so he was going to end up being an unrestricted free agent. And so if you trade him, you open up minutes for
but
Gigi.
They attached a pick. That's the that would be the thing there. Minutes for younger guys.
Minutes for younger guys. It was definitely weird, but there's probably some reasons. It's just the reasons are weird because the Grizzlies probably handled the situation a little bit poorly.
Yeah, it's an excellent front office, Sam, that usually gets it right, and I don't think they did with some of their recent maneuvers.
I mean, look how they got the team, maybe not to where it is today, but like when they were competing, when Ja was healthy a couple years ago, they went and played the Warriors in the postseason and really gave them a good run for their money.
They're still a 2 seed. They're still competing.
They are.
That's why I think they should have let it roll with Marcus Smart. These young guys aren't going anywhere. Let them develop next year.
There's no problem, and just keep. It's just the money has people terrified. But like, even if you want to like be like, oh, like they let Dylan Brooks go, even though he like had a terrible exit where he was getting clowned and blamed for everything, and he went at LeBron and all that stuff. They did a great job of getting the team to where it's at by making smart decisions. Like you said, like the Celtics traded them Desmond Bane. They didn't initially draft him. They went and got him from the Celtics because they liked him. Ja was a great pick. Obviously, Jaren Jackson was a great pick. They've hit on all these young guys. They've picked great guys to come in and be supporting cast members, and it's helped them be a successful team. So I don't really understand why they're cutting costs at this part of the season. If you are trying to push, if you haven't proven that you can do it yet, like the Celtics, you can, and also Springer and Smart are not the same player. They didn't have the same role. Let's not get it twisted. But the Celtics have at least shown you, like, we're good. Like, we've won the championship. We have competed with this group of guys. If you need to make small changes around the edges or cut costs by trading somebody who isn't playing, they should be okay with that. Memphis probably could use all the firepower that they can get. The West is a bloodbath at the top. OKC is a juggernaut. The rest of those teams in the middle pocket all feel about the same level. There's no guarantee that they're going to walk through the playoffs to play OKC in the conference finals. You could use Marcus, who's played deep playoff basketball for the majority of his career.
Yeah. Also, it's not like Ja is on the court every single night this season. So
Correct.
having an insurance policy and Marcus Smart, if you will, probably something that could have come in handy later on in the playoffs. I would love to see, by the way, you just had a light bulb went off. I'd love to see Jaden Springer to Memphis. Would be a fun move. I don't know how much he plays. Jack mentioned that they just cleared minutes for younger guys, but he's only 22, defensive bulldog. I would like that move. I think he's a great fit with the grit and grind culture over there with the Grizzlies. That's going to wrap up this edition of Celtics Rundown. Jack Simone, first, I'll give you the floor, whether it's your social media handles, any work at Hardwood, Houdini, you name it. Time right now to go ahead and plug it.
Yeah, my written work is hardwoodhoudini.com. You can check it out there. Obviously, Sam and I host a podcast. I'm sure he'll also tell you about. How about them Celtics? You can find that. And then I'm Jack Simone NBA everywhere from Twitter to TikTok to Instagram to all that good stuff. So you can check me out there.
Yeah, and you can find me talking to Jack all the time on How About Them C's. I'm writing for Celtics Blog, doing articles. I'm at the games with the fellas. We're on the beat at the pressers, seeing everything happening. So check it out there, Celtics Blog.
Support great journalism. Check out their exceptional work over at Hardwood, Houdini, and Celtics Blog, respectively. Tune in to How About Them C's as well. Phenomenal. One of the most entertaining live streams and pods that you will find. And you can find me over here at Celtics Rundown every week, plus my written work over at Forbes. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate you, and we will be back next week.